Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Hello there. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about a concept that is truly foundational in every great team, and actually in every healthy relationship, and that is psychological safety. I'm sure you've heard about it, but it's so important that I believe we should be thinking about it and talking about it regularly. So let's do it. Picture this. You're sitting in a meeting with a group of colleagues, and you have an idea that you think could really help with the challenge being discussed. Your heart beats a little faster as you consider whether you should speak up. You start to raise your hand slightly, but then you notice a subtle eye roll from the senior director when someone else offers a suggestion. You also notice how the team lead keeps checking her phone whenever certain people are talking. And you remember what happened last month when someone questioned the approach and was cut off with a, hey, we've already decided how to handle this type of response. Your hand drops back to your lap and your idea remains unspoken. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when we decide it's safer to stay quiet than to risk being dismissed, ignored, or even subtly shamed. Okay, we don't want that. Heartbreaking. As leaders, we're often creating these exact conditions on our teams without even realizing it. The slight impatience in our tone when someone asks a, quote, basic question, or the way we move quickly past an idea that doesn't align with what we're already thinking, and the tendency to invite input, but only after decisions are already made. So these very subtle signals create an environment where psychological safety withers and dies. And the consequences are serious. Innovation stalls and problems go unreported until they're crises, and your most talented people start updating their resumes. So today, I want to share a framework and specific communication practices that can really transform your team culture and build that foundation of safety. Because creating psychological safety isn't about being nice. I mean, you should always be nice, right? But it's about creating conditions for people to really grow and thrive and do their best work. So first, let's get on the same page about what psychological safety really is. Harvard professor Amy Edmondson defines psychological safety as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. In practical terms, it's what allows your team to bring their full capabilities to work. Timothy Clark, he's another author here that I want to mention, and he wrote this great little book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, very helpful, where he explains that psychological safety isn't just sort of present or absent. It develops through 4 distinct stages, each building on the previous one. So level 1 is inclusion safety, which is when people are asking, hey, do I belong here? Do I belong with these people? Can I be myself? No? Level 2 is learner safety. At this point, people are asking, can I take risks and try things without fear of judgment? Can I make mistakes? Which of course will happen whenever we're learning. Level 3 is contributor safety. And the question on people's minds here is, are my unique gifts valued? Do I get to contribute something to this team? Do I get the feeling that I am adding value? And level 4 is challenger safety. And here the question is, can I question things? Can I question authority? Can I question the established way of doing things? So I want to give you an example. Over the weekend, I was talking with a friend who works in what she described as a toxic workplace. And I was thinking a lot about safety because in part, what makes this workplace toxic and any workplace toxic is that her manager doesn't make space for her, doesn't include her in things that affect her, and doesn't encourage her to take risks, doesn't seek her contributions, doesn't give her credit for what she does contribute, and just pays lip service to the things that she says need attention or need to change. So my friend is a highly accomplished professional. She is at the peak of her career and she has a lot to offer. But the way her manager communicates is slowly but surely sending the message that she doesn't fully belong. And it is a terrible waste of potential. So understanding these stages gives us a roadmap for transforming our communication. Let's take a deeper look at what happens at each stage and some specific communication practices that make the difference. Let's start with stage 1, and that's inclusion safety. I remember one job I had early in my career, and it turned out, by the way, to be one of the best jobs ever, so I'm not complaining. But I do remember distinctly that when I arrived, there were no introductions. I had no computer, no phone, no desk was set up. There was no plan at the time for really introducing me to my team or my new role. And it was as if, once the position got approved and was filled, the process just stopped, you know? Anyway, inclusion safety means people feel welcomed and accepted for who they are, not despite who they are. And without this foundation, team members burn valuable energy just trying to fit in. The key communication practice here is active acknowledgement. This means deliberately drawing people into conversations, especially those who are new or who might feel peripheral for any reason. We address this, actually, I have a course specifically called The First 90 Days, a team approach to onboarding. And in that course, we teach the whole team to get involved in welcoming and getting to know and integrating new folks, ensuring that anyone who joins the team gets a robust, warm, and thorough welcome, not just from HR or the manager, but from the whole extended team. And the best organizations I know, they pay specific attention to this process because first impressions matter. But inclusion safety is not just for new people. It's actually all about making sure that everyone feels that they're an important part of the group, and it's an ongoing commitment. It's about making space for people and ensuring that you are actively inviting voices into important conversations. For example, instead of asking this kind of question, and we've all heard this, something like this, like, any other thoughts before we move on, right? Try something more inclusive, like this, something like, Joan, you've worked with similar clients. What's your take? Right? So really asking about something specific. And by the way, be sure to really listen to the answer. This demonstrates a true interest in the person as a unique individual, and it honors their contribution. So another powerful practice for inclusion safety is validating emotional realities. When someone expresses concern, resist the tendency to blow them off or to jump straight to solutions. Instead, validate them first. And it might sound like this, like, oh, yeah, I get it. I understand why that would be concerning. Thanks for bringing it up. Just validating shows that you value not just their ideas, but their authentic experience. And the goal isn't just getting everyone to participate. It's about actively fostering belonging. These subtle shifts in communication tell people, you matter here. We're better with you than without you. Let's go on to stage 2, learner safety. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed to ask a question, but you hesitated because you didn't want to look incompetent? I know I have. Or have you ever made a mistake and spent energy covering it up rather than admitting it to the team? That's what we're addressing when we talk about learner safety. Here's 3 simple communication practices that can really help others feel safe when they're learning or in that learning mode. First, change how you respond to questions. Like when someone asks something, especially if it seems kind of basic, pay attention to your reaction. Do you sigh or do you say, as we discussed? These responses shut people down fast. Instead, try something like, hey, I'm glad you asked that, or that's an important question. Second, normalize not knowing. Create a team where gee, I don't know, but let's find out, is stronger than pretending to have all the answers. Model this yourself. Something like this. Hey, that's a great question. I'm not sure. Let's figure this out. And third, reframe mistakes as learning opportunities. Like for real, every mistake is a learning opportunity. So, practice this. When someone makes an error, use questions like this, like, okay, what can we learn from this? Or what can or should we do differently next time? Or how can I better support you? These questions can transform every situation into an opportunity for the whole team to get better. And they might even protect you from more egregious mistakes in the future. So definitely activate the learning. Like if you focus mostly on learning and growing, safety will emerge. So think about the last mistake that someone made on your team. Like, how did you respond? How do you generally respond to those things? And do your responses make it more or less likely that people will bring you problems and mistakes and be transparent in the future? Okay, that's the challenge for you. Let's move on to stage 3, which is all about fostering contributor safety. So imagine this, a team member comes to you and says, after 3 meetings where my suggestions were either ignored or attributed to others, I just stopped contributing. Like, why bother when no one values what I have to offer? That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Contributor safety is about creating an environment where people feel their unique talents and insights are genuinely valued. It's not just that they're allowed to contribute. It's that you want them to contribute and their contributions matter. The essential communication practice here is giving specific and meaningful recognition, not generic praise like, oh, good job, right? But acknowledgement that connects their contribution to an impact. Saying something like this, like be specific. I'll just give you an example. Hey, so-and-so, your analysis of customer feedback like really revealed some patterns none of us had noticed. And it really shifted our understanding of the problem, right? So talk about what it was specifically and why it mattered. Another really powerful approach here is being deliberate about seeking alternate perspectives. Before driving toward a solution, actively draw out diverse viewpoints. Say something like this. Hey, Lisa, you've done this before. What should we keep in mind as we move forward? Something like that. And a third critical practice is giving credit where credit is due. Implement ideas and attribute those ideas to the person. So when you use someone's suggestion, make the connection explicit. Like say, hey, we're implementing the approach that Miguel suggested last month. Show the person your contribution matters. Nothing kills contribution faster than soliciting ideas and then either ignoring them or claiming them as your own. It's awful. Like that can really shut people down. I worked with a technology company one time where team members really had stopped offering ideas in meetings. And when we investigated further, we discovered that their manager had this habit of presenting their suggestions to senior leadership without giving credit. And once he started explicitly crediting team members, the flow of ideas increased by a lot. Because what happens when contributor safety flourishes? It's people stop holding back. They volunteer their insights, their expertise, their creativity because they know it matters. They feel a genuine stake in the team's success because they can see their fingerprints on its achievements. And that feels really good. Like we don't all need effusive praise for everything we do. It's not that. It's showing people that their contributions matter because we all want to contribute and feel that our ideas are valued. So let's move on to stage 4 and talk about communication strategies for challenger safety. So challenger safety is level 4. And ask yourself, have you ever held back from challenging a bad decision because it wasn't worth the potential argument or the backlash? Or have you ever watched your organization continue down a very problematic path because no one felt comfortable questioning leadership? Or did you just stop challenging because you knew nothing would come of it? This is what challenger safety addresses, the ability to question the status quo without fear. So let me say, this doesn't mean that your ideas or your challenges will always be implemented, right? I mean, challenging is one thing and feeling safe to challenge is important, but it doesn't mean that just because you challenge, that everyone will follow through. Okay, I just want to make that really clear. That can't be a condition of safety because often there's more to the picture than any one person can see. So, but we still want people to feel safe to bring up issues, and we want to attend to those issues. So, here's 3 specific communication practices that can really help. First, invite challenge. Invite it. Don't assume people are going to feel comfortable questioning decisions without a clear invitation. Try something like this. You could say, hey, before we finalize this, I need to hear concerns or alternative perspectives. What are we going to be missing? Or what have we missed? Or something like that. Or you could say, okay, I've given you my thoughts on this, but I could be wrong. What other perspectives are there? Or what flaws do you see? So invite it. I often teach people to use these specific kind of placeholders for these kinds of conversations so that teams don't rush into action without really considering the impact of their decisions. It's a very powerful practice to just pause before you take action and really specifically ask for alternative viewpoints. Okay, the second practice here is to teach yourself to respond with curiosity, not defensiveness. In our last episode, we talk about emotional broadcasting. And, when someone challenges your idea, we want to make sure we're broadcasting curiosity, that we're feeling curious, really, and demonstrating curiosity. So your reaction when someone challenges your idea determines whether others will speak up in the future. So instead of getting defensive when someone challenges you, try something like this, like, hey, yeah, that's a perspective I hadn't considered. Tell me more. Or, gosh, you're seeing this differently. That's really valuable. Can you share your rationale or how did you get there? Something like that, right? Ask for more. All right, the third communication practice is to visibly reward constructive dissent. When someone's challenge leads to a better outcome, acknowledge it. You could say something like, hey, Mark's pushback on our initial approach led us to a much stronger solution. I'm glad you did that. That's exactly the kind of challenge we need. That kind of thing. I coached a leader who couldn't understand why his team wasn't innovative. They felt flat. And watching him in meetings, I noticed that whenever someone suggested something that departed from the decision he'd sort of already made in his mind, he immediately pointed out the flaws and reminded the team that they'd tried that before, but it didn't work. It's the old, yeah, we did that before. He wasn't even aware of how he was shutting his team down. And honestly, he had no intention of doing so. So once he noticed this, he started responding with curiosity instead of criticism, and his team began offering better, more creative solutions. So it's subtle, right? It's a practice. So here's a challenge. Think about your reaction the last time someone challenged your thinking. Did your response encourage or discourage future challenges? All right, let's put it all together. Here's what's critical to understand. These 4 stages, they build on each other. You can't expect people to really challenge the status quo, right? Stage 4, if they don't even feel included. And that's stage 1. And this is where many of us go wrong as leaders. We say we want innovative thinking and constructive feedback, but we haven't built the foundational safety that makes those things possible. So how do you know where your team stands on this? Because probably asking, hey, do you feel safe? That it may or may not work, right? But I want you to pay attention to these signals. If people are quiet in meetings or they only speak when they're directly addressed, you need to work on inclusion safety. You need to build trust. If mistakes are hidden or questions go unasked, focus on learner safety. If good ideas are offered but quickly abandoned when they meet resistance, you need to build contributor safety. And if your team continues with the same approaches over and over, despite getting poor results, you need to develop challenger safety. You need them to challenge things so that they'll try something new. Remember that psychological safety isn't about being nice. It's about creating conditions where truth can be spoken and heard. It's about making it easier to admit mistakes and raise concerns and propose bold ideas and challenge the status quo when necessary. And the good news is you don't need to overhaul your entire leadership approach overnight. Even small changes in how you communicate can start making a difference immediately. Before we wrap up, I want to address something really important that's often missing from discussions about psychological safety, and that is personal responsibility. While I've focused on what leaders can do to create safe environments, psychological safety is a two-way street. Team members also have a crucial role to play in establishing their own sense of safety. If you're not in a leadership position, here's what you can do. First, practice appropriate vulnerability. Sometimes you need to take the first step. Ask a clarifying question. Admit when you're unsure. Share your perspective, even when it differs from the prevailing view. Each small act of courage will make the next one easier. Second, be proactive about building trust. Don't wait for others to initiate. Reach out to your colleagues, follow through on commitments, demonstrate competence in your work. Trust is built through consistent small actions over time. And if you're recoiling from others and using that, the excuse that you don't feel safe, I hate to say it, but you're contributing to the demise of trust on the team. So be proactive. Third, develop resilience to imperfect feedback. Not every leader has mastered the art of delivering feedback skillfully. It would be nice if they did, but it's not the case. So try to look for the value in what's being said, even if it's delivered poorly. Remember that growth often comes from our most uncomfortable moments, and imagine yourself resilient. Finally, take ownership of your growth. Seek out opportunities to learn and contribute. Don't wait for permission to develop your skills or share your ideas. Try it out. Don't play small. I've seen really remarkable examples of individuals who created psychological safety for themselves and ultimately transformed their team culture from the middle or the bottom, in a sense. Your actions matter regardless of your position. So take that to heart. Let me leave you with this thought. As a leader, your communication sets the tone. Every interaction either builds safety or erodes it. There's no neutral ground. So when you implement even the simple strategies we've discussed, from practicing more conversational turn-taking and really listening and explicitly inviting challenge, you create an environment where people bring their full intelligence and creativity to work. You build a team where people want to stay and contribute their best. And what could be better? This isn't just good for your people, it's good for your results. Research consistently shows that teams with high psychological safety innovate more and make fewer errors and adapt better to change. And if you need help with this, think about the meeting environment. Let me know. I can help you with this. We can build processes into your meetings that establish safety time and again. But this week, I encourage you to identify just one communication to practice to focus on. Where's your team getting stuck? Which strategy is going to help them move forward? And if you start implementing these approaches, let me know. I'd love to hear about your experience. Always connect with me on my website or by email or social media. Share your story. Tell me about safety in your environment. And just remember, creating psychological safety is not about being perfect. You don't have to get it right every time. It's about being intentional with how you communicate, and it starts with your very next conversation. So thank you so much for being here with me this week. Until next week, go lead the way. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels @ClaireLaughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.